What? It is time for the Kansas City Chiefs, number 10 of 32 NFL team previews here in 2023. I'm Jim Derry, and this is bet.NOLA.com, powered by the Dattitude Podcast. Moving on to the defending Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. It should just be easy. They got to have Patrick Mahomes. They still have Travis Kelce. They still have Andy Reid. Good night, everybody. Preview's over. Tomorrow's the Las Vegas Raiders. We'll see you then. Not so fast. This team has some things that make me worry just a little, enough to get me off of some of these numbers, enough to make me stay away from Super Bowl futures, enough to make me stay away from division futures. All things we need to talk about coming up next. When you talk about the Chiefs, you have to talk about 2022 before we can talk about 2023. And of course, Patrick Mahomes was, well, Patrick Mahomes. Threw for 5,200 yards. He was not only the league MVP, but he was also the Super Bowl MVP, which is really hard to do in case you hadn't figured that out by now. They still have Andy Reid. We talked about this in his 11th season back with this team. It's hard to believe that he was with Philadelphia longer than he's with Kansas City. Is he going to make it another 3 years and equal that out? I'm not so sure. But look, as good as this team was last year, there were times when they were kind of weird, right? They weren't the number one seed really till the end of the season, and then Buffalo and Cincinnati had the postponement, and that kind of like sealed it for the Chiefs. But remember, they were talking about maybe playing the conference championship at a neutral site because if Buffalo did such and such or whatever, and that we never had to worry about it. Buffalo didn't even make it to the championship game. The Bengals did. It was Chiefs and Bengals anyway. They played it in KC, and the Chiefs won in a controversial finish. So my point of all this is, you think about who they lost to. Besides the fluke loss of the Colts, they lost to the Bills, and they lost to the Bengals, two of the top contenders in the AFC, both last year, both the year before that, and again this year. It never, to me, even in the Super Bowl, because they had to come back in that game, there were so many games last year where they just didn't feel like they didn't necessarily feel like their dominant selves. It worked out for them. They went 14-3. So when, in my little story, I always had the section of, what goes right and what has to go right. Well, if you would have had a section last year that said what needs to go right for this Chiefs team to win the Super Bowl, I would have said pretty much everything that ended up happening. Because, look, we thought they would be a Super Bowl contender. We thought that the schedule would be tough. We were right about the schedule. We were wrong about them not getting the number one seed because we thought they would be better later in the year. And you look at who they lost and who they brought in, and you could see it right there. Top newcomers. Look, they went all out on the offensive line. Why? Because they lost offensive linemen. They lost their left tackle. They lost their right tackle, especially losing Orlando Brown hurts. Bringing in Donovan Smith is nice to replace Orlando Brown. And really, you talk about Taylor. Taylor's going to be a great fit at right tackle. He's actually an upgrade. But here are some of the things that make me a little bit nervous. When you lose a Juju Smith-Schuster, and I get it, they lost Tyreek Hill last year and it didn't matter. But you lose Juju Smith-Schuster and you lose McCole Hardman, you're losing kind of like a chunks. And it's plural now. You're losing chunks of this offense. Is the cohesiveness going to be the same on the offensive line? Travis Kelce is entering a season where he's going to turn 34 in October. Remember Tony Gonzalez, who was the best tight end in the game before Travis Kelce? Well, this is the exact same age that he started to begin his descent to earth before he retired at age 37. I'm not saying Kelce's not going to be a big deal. But when you have 1,330 yards and 12 touchdowns, if that changes to, let's say, 1,050 and 9, or say you get hurt, and Kelce's had seasons where he's gotten hurt and missed games, how much does that affect this team? Mahomes without Kelce is a huge deal. One day it's going to happen. But Mahomes without Kelce is a huge deal. Is this a season where he misses 2, 3, 4 games? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But even if he plays throughout, it's hard to believe that he can go through and have 1,330 yards receiving again. I just think this is maybe a season where he starts to slide. And then you look on the defensive side of the football. You lose Colin Saunders to the Saints. And then on the outside, you lose Frank Clark, getting a little bit older, but still to lose Frank Clark and to lose him to the Broncos, kind of a big deal. Safety Juan Thornhill is gone. He signed a 3-year, $21 million deal to go to Cleveland. So, frankly, big pieces of this defense, they're missing. And as we record this right now on August the 9th, you have defensive tackle Chris Jones, who's in a contract dispute. He's entering the last year of a contract extension that he signed a couple years ago, but now he's not happy with that deal. He wants a better extension. He's 29 years old. I don't necessarily blame him. He's going into the prime of his career for a defensive end. Is he going to get it? Most likely he's going to get something. Most likely they're going to come to a deal. But again, as I record this, he's missing camp, and he has missed camp. We're over 2 weeks into the Chiefs' camp, and he hasn't been there. Are we sure that this team 20th in rushing last year, which ended up not being a deal because they were first overall because they were so good in the passing game? I just don't know that. I mean, throwing for 5,000 yards is really, really hard to do. I mean, so if Mahomes throws, let's say he throws for 4,500 yards and is a little bit more human, can the rushing game, can Pacheco take that next step and keep them up towards where they be? Because I'm not sure this defense is going to be able to finish 11th again. In fact, frankly, I don't think they're going to be able to do that. So you're talking about some issues that I don't know. It's not going to be nearly as easy. And winning 14 games again, I think is probably a pipe dream for this team. Let's be realistic. Let's look at the schedule now and get into that. And again, last year when we talked about their schedule, it was kind of the thing that held us from just going gung-ho early on for the Chiefs. This year, I definitely don't feel the same way as I felt last year. Last year, that first part of the schedule, all the way really through the first half of the schedule, was just front-loaded and just insanely tough. This year, although it says third toughest schedule, and remember, we use a formula based off of the projected wins and losses from Caesars Sportsbook to figure out our toughest schedule. That number says third, but if you look to me, it doesn't start like a third toughest schedule at all. You could say whatever you want about Detroit, but at home to start the season, against as they unveil the banners and everything else, Kansas City's going to win that game. I don't know what the spread's going to be. You can ask me that question in a month or so, or I guess less than a month, but whatever. They're not losing that game. Then at Jacksonville, playing Chicago at home. At the Jets is going to be an interesting game. At Minnesota is going to be an interesting game as well. And then Denver at home, Chargers, and at Denver again. There are some things about this schedule that I know it's hard to say because 14-3 is tough, but this schedule is easier than it was last year. I mean, of course, we're all looking forward to the November 20th game after the bye week, after they come back from Germany where they play Philadelphia. Then it's a mix at the end of games that they almost certainly should win with games that are going to be tough. You're talking about at Vegas. I mean, we'll get to Vegas tomorrow, but at Green Bay, what Green Bay team are we going to say? But those are two teams. You talk about playing at Green Bay in December really is never easy. Chiefs had to do it a couple years ago. In fact, Jordan Love was the quarterback of that game, and it was a low-scoring slugfest. Could we see that again? Maybe. Then you talk about playing Buffalo. They've had trouble with Buffalo in the regular season on December the 10th. At New England, playing in Foxborough in the middle of December before they come home for Vegas. And then two tough ones to finish it off. Home against Cincinnati, again, who they've had trouble with in the regular season. And then at the LA Chargers. So, and drum roll, please, it's time for predictions. 11-6. I just don't have the same feeling about this team. And when I say 11-6, I will tell you this. There is nothing. I mean, I have to have a best bet for every team. So with that, I'm going to tell you, I guess my best bet is there is some value. If you feel the way that I feel that Kansas City is going to struggle just a little bit, there's value in that under because you're getting juiced your way to be under 11.5. That being said, I'm not going to play it. It's too hard to play because I'd be surprised if they won 10 or fewer. and I'd be very surprised if they won 14 again. I just don't think it can happen with this schedule, and I don't think it can happen with this team because I do think their defense is going to regress a little bit. Too hard to make any bet on this team. I think you stay away from them. Tomorrow, Vegas, Friday, Raiders. We'll see you then.